Hello, my name is John Williamson, photographer and product evangelist for Profoto, and welcome to our webinar. Before we begin, I have a couple notes. One, this is a live webinar, so if you have any questions, feel free to type them down in the chat box below on your screen. And also, if any of you happen to get disconnected, this video will be available to be seen on the Profoto blog after we're done today. So, one commonality I've found in studio lighting is that people have a tendency to overcomplicate things. They make it more difficult than it needs to be. So what I want to do today is I want to show you how to do studio lighting simply and easily so you get consistent results no matter where you're shooting. And really, if you look at studio photography, when you break it down, there are two main parts that you're going to have most times when you shoot. You're going to have a main light source and a fill light. Your fill light's really just responsible for one thing, your lighting ratio, or the difference in exposure value from your highlights and shadow. That's contrast, that's all it does. Your main light source is responsible for just two things. It's responsible for setting your exposure. So once you have all your lights set up, what you're going to do is take your final meter reading off of your main light source. And it's responsible for setting your lighting pattern. Now, lighting patterns are the shape of the highlights and shadows on your subject's face. The reason this is so important is that highlights and shadows is what's going to make your image. Think of it this way. Highlights project, shadows recede. It's that separation, that contrast in an image that's going to give it depth and dimension. So when we talk about lighting patterns, or sometimes they're called styles of light, we have 6 different styles: short, broad, split, Rembrandt, butterfly, and loop lighting. Today, I'm going to show you how to adjust your main light source for short lighting. And really, I use short lighting the majority of the time because it's quick and easy to set up, and it gives a very dramatic effect. Short lighting is described as the light from our main light source illuminating the side of our subject that's away from the camera. So to demonstrate, I'm going to bring up our model, Nikki. So when we go to set up our main light source, the first thing we have to decide is what side of our subject we're going to put it on. Now, Nikki made it easy on me today because she has her hair pulled straight back. But one of the first things I like to look for is a part in somebody's hair. If somebody has a part coming down and then you light into it, what's going to happen is that hair is going to cast a shadow on your subject's face. We don't want that. So what we always want to do is you want to light into the part so that we're not getting any erroneous shadows. I don't have that problem here. The other thing also is simply to ask your subject. If you're shooting, say, like a high school senior, most people will have an opinion as to what side they look better on. There's actually some truth to that because the human face isn't symmetrical. It's asymmetrical. I know that I have one ear that's bigger than the other or one eye that drops down lower than the other. So your client or your subject may have a good idea what side they look better on. Here, I've chosen to put my light on the left-hand side. Now, when you position your subject for short lighting, it's quick and easy because all you need to do is tell your subject, put your hips and shoulders towards the light and look back at the camera. Anytime you tell them that, it's always going to be short lighting. So Nikki, that's what I want you to do. So I want you to face your hips and shoulders right towards this light. So we have our light set up here the correct, and she's facing it the correct way. Now the next thing we need to do is decide how close or far away we're going to put our light source. For me, this is really easy. It's always just outside of the frame. So what this is going to do is it's going to make sure that my light is as close to my subject as I can get it. See, when we start talking about quality of light, or we start talking about softness of light, size and distance are the only two things that are going to determine the softness of that light. The larger your light source, the softer it will be, and the closer your light source is to your subject, the softer it will be. When we talk about soft light, what we're talking about is the transition from highlights to shadows. So if that transition is a soft, gradual transition, that's soft light. But if we have a hard, sharp, crisp, defined line, it's going to be a hard light source. So today we want to do a nice soft light, so I've positioned it just outside the frame where I'm shooting. Finally, what we want to do is adjust the height. And basically, when I set up my lights, the height is always determined by the color saturation of the subject's eyes. So what I want to do is I want to bring my light source up way higher than what it needs to be and lower it into position until I see the color in their eyes pop. See, the mask of the face, the eyes, the nose, and the mouth, that's the most important part. So I need to make sure I have that saturation level of the eyes. So what I want to do is I'm going to come over here, loosen this up. As I bring it up, I'm going to bring it up higher than what it needs to be, and as I lower it into position, you're going to see that light change on the subject's face. Just going to right there. It's as simple as that. I'm not going to overcomplicate things. I'm not going to over-adjust it. I'm just going to move it up and down until I see her eye, the color in her eyes pop. Now, before we can start taking pictures, one thing I always do is take a meter reading. I use a Sekonic 758, and what this is going to do, the light meter, I'm going to plug in what my ISO is, and I'm going to plug in what my shutter speed is. When I take a pop from the flash, it's going to actually tell me what my aperture needs to be for a correct exposure. So going up here. So I'm shooting at ISO 100 at 125th of a second at f11. So we're going to come in here. I want you to turn your head towards me just a little bit more. Perfect, just like that. Great. So if we look at the screen, what you're going to see from the highlights and the shadows is that my main light source is illuminating the side of my subject's face that's away from the camera. It's right here. Now, the transition from highlights to shadows is happening on the side of the face that's towards the camera. This is important. Remember how I said highlights project and shadows recede? Well, by having the brightest part of the face away from the camera, we're actually highlighting a smaller section of the face. So the viewer's attention is drawn towards that smaller portion. So this has a thinning effect on our subject. So short lighting is a great way to have somebody slim down in the image. So if you have somebody like myself come into your studio, I have a round face, this big beard. If we don't want to accentuate the size of my face, we'd want to mitigate that. So lighting is the best way that we have. In lighting, when we're shooting regular, everyday people, we can highlight or mitigate the aspects of the person that we want to make them look their very best. So that's a little bit about how to set up the light. What I want to do is take a moment and talk to you about the Profoto D1s that I'm shooting with and some of their features. For current Profoto users, the first thing you're going to recognize is the absence of our Pyrex dome. With the D1 line, what we've done is recess the flash tube, and we put a flat glass plate on the front. The glass plate is still frosted, but what this allowed us to do is to protect that flash tube inside the unit itself. This helps for travel and transportation. Moving to the back of the unit, what you're going to see is a large control dial in the center. This is going to be used for changing the power of the strobe itself. You see at the top a digital readout with the indicator 10. This is the highest power output for the strobe. When we turn the dial, we can actually make adjustments in tenth of a stop increments. Or, if we slightly depress the dial inward and then make the same motion, we're going to change the power in full stop increments. This allows us to make coarse, quick adjustments or fine-tuning adjustments in tenth of a stop increments. The three buttons on the side are actually two-stage switches. So a quick press will turn that option on or off, while holding the button in will actually cycle through all the available options. On the first button, we have slave. This is our ability to control the light. We have radio and we have IR. Radio is simply the radio that's built into it, is Profoto's new proprietary Air remote. We're going to talk about that in just a little bit. The IR is our optical slave. The optical cell is actually right above the handle, below the housing right here. You see the little black dot. When that sees light from another strobe being fired, it will trigger the D1 to fire as well. The next option we have is ready. This is going to be our indicator when the capacitors are fully recharged. We can have a visual indicator or an audible indicator. So the first option is beep. So if I just press this and turn it on, again, by holding down this button, I can cycle through to beep. So when I fire the unit, you're going to hear that audible recognition of when the capacitors are fully recycled. This is important because you don't want to outshoot your lights and get inconsistent exposures because you're shooting a little bit too quick. The other one, if I press and hold down, is dim. What dim does is it controls the power of a modeling light while the flash is recycling. So until it's fully recycled, it's going to stay at a low setting, and then it'll pop back up to full again once it's fully recycled. So if I hit test, you'll see it dim down and then come back up. Down here underneath this is model. This is where we actually control our modeling light itself. We have two options. We have prop and free. Prop actually stands for proportional. What that's going to do is, and if I switch this over here by holding it in, proportional is going to change the power of our modeling light as we change the power of the strobe. Free, if we switch over to free, will actually allow us to independently control the power of the strobe and the power of the modeling light. This is really important because if we want to shoot at a low power in the studio, we still might want to have that focusing aid or that ambience in the studio by having a full power modeling light. And so to set this, we simply press the model set button and our digital indicator is going to blink. While that's blinking, in the same manner we controlled the power of a strobe, we're going to control the power of the modeling light. Again, tenth of stop increments, or if I press in, full stop increments. Allows us to set the power of that independently of the power of the flash. One of the things that really separates us is our ability to have consistent, accurate exposures and color coming out of the strobe each and every time. With the D1, we also have the ability of having a 7-stop power range adjustment. This gives us a wide range of f-stops that we can shoot at in the studio, making it an incredibly versatile light. Also, we have a flash recycling time at over 10 frames a second. This allows us to shoot at high speeds in the studio, but still have consistent, accurate exposures each and every time. We also have flash durations up to a 3700th of a second, making it incredibly versatile for shooting high-speed shots. Possibly the biggest benefit that we have is the ability to use all of our Profoto modifiers and light shaping tools with the D1 line. So it doesn't matter what you're shooting with today, what you invest in tomorrow, your light shaping tools will always fit your Profoto lights. So all your existing modifiers work on this. What that means is, no matter where you're at, you're using the same light shaping tools to create your images. Consistency is the key to success. So by using the same tools in the same environment each time, you're able to get the exact same look that you've built your career on. So that was a little bit about the lights themselves I'm using. I should probably also mention that I'm shooting with a 3x4 softbox. As a general rule of thumb, what they say is you want your softbox to be about twice the size of your subject. So for a simple head and shoulder shot, a 2x3 works great. And I find a 3x4 just about one of the most versatile sizes because it's a great for head and shoulder shot, but also it's easily handled inside an executive office or out in the field. And I get a great quality of light when doing half body or 3/4 bodies with it also. Also, there's a lot of really good questions coming in, and we're going to address those when we get towards the end of the webinar. So the next thing I want to talk about, because we're almost done, we talked about what side to put our light on and how to properly set the height. But the next thing we want to do is talk about feathering the light. So I have Nikki come back out. Again, we're going to be using a short lighting pattern. So have face your hips and your shoulders towards the light. Now, anytime we reset up our lights or we restage for a new set, we always want to reset the lights. We want to re-zero them. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to reset the height. So we're going to come over here. I'm just going to move it up and down. Again, all I'm looking for is, look right here, Nikki. I'm just looking for that color of her eyes. Perfect. Now this, honestly, is where a lot of people stop. But what we want to do is take it one step further, and we want to feather the light. And all I'm going to do is I'm going to take this softbox, and I'm going to move it horizontally from the right to the left. And I'm going to watch as those shadows change on her face. And I'm going to set it to where I think they look the best. Again, this isn't anything overly complicated. I'm going to set the height so her eyes look perfect, and then I'm going to feather it left to right until I like the way the shadows play on her face. So all I'm going to do is come over here, shadow that right about there. Now you'll notice that my light source is actually aimed past my subject. That's because every light has an apex, its brightest point, and it's going to fall off in concentric circles from that point. So I'm taking the brightest part of our light, aiming it past my subject, so I'm letting the light fall off onto her. So now that we have that, we'll take a few more photos here. Again, anytime you change your settings or change your light, you want to take another meter reading to be just to be sure. Again, ISO 100, 125th of a second at f11. Turn your face towards me just a little bit. Perfect, right there. Great. One thing you want to make sure you pay attention to when you're photographing somebody, especially when it's so tight of their face, is that you don't have the nose protruding out from the cheek. So if you look on your screen, I have her nose being inside of the mask of her face here. It's not jutting out from the side of her cheek. We don't want to emphasize the size of somebody's nose. So if that nose was to protrude from the side of her cheek, again, that's drawing attention to it. But remember how I said highlights project and shadows recede? Well, if I had the light hitting her face so that the shadow from the nose created a black triangle on one side, I have a bright highlight and a dark shadow. All the portraits I've taken, I've never had anybody come into my studio and say, John, my nose is my favorite feature. Can you really make it stand out in the image? It's one of those things that we want to mitigate. So when we position our lights, we want that shadow to come down towards the corner of the mouth, and we don't want to draw attention to the nose. So positioning and lighting can help do that. So now that we've finished up positioning, we've taken a couple images, what I want to do is show you, I'm shooting wirelessly right now with the Air remote, the D1 Air system. I'll show you a short video about how this works with the D1s. The Air functionality of our D1s allows us to fire the strobes remotely, as well as control every aspect of the strobe as if you're behind it from the camera. The Air remote simply mounts onto your hot shoe. And to set it up, what we're going to do is we're going to make sure the slave option on the back of the D1 is set to radio. Next, we're going to press the channel set button in the lower left-hand portion of the light, and it's going to bring up a number and a letter. The number is what channel we're on. All of the lights that you have set up need to be on the same channel. Just turning the dial, you're going to change the channel that you're on. By slightly pressing the dial in, you're going to change what group you're on. Every light's going to have the channel and group set on it. So for this particular one, we're set to 1A. Going over here to our Air remote, this top part here allows us to set the channel. Simply by pressing the channel button, we're going to cycle through the 8 channels that are available on the unit. We're going to set it to 1. Next, down here at the bottom, you see a group button. By pressing the group again, we're going to cycle through the 6 groups that are available. I want to set this on 1A. So now, from the back of our camera, on the hot shoe mounted controller, I can turn the entire head off. I can turn the head back on. I can actually turn the modeling light on and off from the back of the camera. The thing that makes it most powerful is our ability to make adjustments to the power setting from the back of our camera. We can do this in 1/10 of a stop increments simply by making a small push on the button here. We'll change it in 1/10 of a stop increments. Or if I press and hold down for a second, we can do full stop changes on the back of the strobe. This means, again, we have coarse or fine adjustments available. Now, when we set these up in a studio environment, what we're going to want to do is make sure that all of our strobes are set to the same channel. The group, on the other hand, which is indicated by the letter on here, we want each of those to be set to a different group. So my main light, for instance, will be on group A. My fill light might be on group B. So by changing this to 1B, I can go down here, change this to 1B, and have the same control of this from a different light standpoint. Now I can control the ratio of light. So if I need just a little bit more contrast, I can lower my fill light down a bit. This is really dynamic when we start shooting outside. As we're shooting, let's say the ambient light, the entire shot's changing, I can actually hit master, which will light up all the groups, and make adjustments in proportion to all the lights. This will allow me to change the power, but not the lighting ratio as I'm shooting. So the Air remote can control your light up to 1,000 feet away. With the Air remote, we have full functionality control. We also have a product called the Air Sync that allows us just to fire your strobe, and also the Air USB. This gives us full functionality control from your laptop or computer. So that's really it. remember, if you're ever having problems setting your lights up, or when you're shooting, if you don't like the results that you're getting, take a step back, take a deep breath, and remember, how am I messing this up? How am I making this more difficult than it needs to be? I have to do that all the time. If you're not liking your results, reset, think about how to set it up, and keep it simple. So now what I want to do is I want to take some of the questions you guys have asked during the webinar, and I want to address them. So our first question is, we actually have quite a few questions come on about our recessed flash tube. Some existing Profoto users might notice that we no longer have the Pyrex dome, and we've taken the flash tube and we've recessed it into the body of the flash. So the D1s are unique in that aspect. What we've done is by recessing the flash tube internally, we've made it easier to transport, and we've protected that flash tube. Plus, the D1 kits actually come with an incredibly well-bit kit stand, and so well-bit kit bag. So what happens is that bag comes with laser-cut high-density foam inserts for the lights. These travel extraordinarily well. So that's really the reason we did it. It doesn't change the quality of light. Having that recessed flash tube and the flat plate does not change the quality of light at all. It will change to some degree the specularity, but only if you're using silver reflectors. If you're using a common modifier, soft boxes, umbrellas, you're really not going to notice that. You're not going to notice a difference from the legacy Profoto products. So just something to keep in mind. The next is our D1s are 100% compatible with Pocket Wizards. As you saw in the video, we have the sync jack located just underneath the unit. You can plug your existing Pocket Wizards right into there. It'll work just fine. One thing to keep in mind, though, is it is now an 1/8-inch jack on the bottom of that. So it does differ a little bit from existing, our compact lights or the acute line, in that it is an 1/8 inch, not a 1/4 inch. So the other one. So we had a question here. The question is, do you keep the softbox perpendicular to the subject, or do you tilt it just a little? And really that depends on your subject and on the softbox. You'll notice here that I have this almost perpendicular to the subject. The reason being is that I'm using a 3x4. So I have a lot of the light is wrapping around my subject. Now, if I had a smaller softbox where I was going to get a harder light, my positioning of the softbox will be more critical. So I might have to tilt it down, again, like I mentioned before, to control that shadow from the nose. But most of the time, if I'm working with soft light, I'm keeping it perpendicular to my subject. So the other thing also is that with these Air remotes, we also have an Air USB. What this does is this will plug in, it has Profoto software so you can control the lights from your computer. That same Air USB is compatible with Capture One. The Capture One software has a module that you can download and add so you can control all your Air lights from inside of Capture One. So I had a question about the 6 styles of lighting. The 6 styles of lighting are short, broad, split, Rembrandt, butterfly, and loop lighting. And again, depending on your subject is depending on which style of light that you're going to use. For being a wedding photographer, when I would go out into the field shooting, I need something that was quick, easy to set up. So like I said, hips and shoulders towards the light, look back towards the camera. It's so easy to verbally communicate how to set up this light. It's what I use 80-90% of the time when I'm in the field. The other styles of light are equally as adept at lighting different people in different situations. So we'll be covering more of those styles in future webinars. So what I want you guys to do is log on to Profoto blog and look for our next webinar we're going to have coming out this year. It's actually going to be over fill light and rim light. So I want to thank you all very much for joining me today, and you guys have a wonderful day.